Hi everyone, Macsen here. Welcome to my latest Stellaris Let's Play using the newly released 1.3 patch, the Heinlein Patch. And accompanying that patch, there's also a new DLC which Paradox has released, or about to release. It's the Leviathan DLC. It's a story DLC they're calling it, which adds a number of new features to the game as well. So in this first video, I'm going to be basically discussing many of the new features. Today, the 18th of October, the patch notes were actually released for the patch and the accompanying DLC. Paradox were kind enough to actually send me a Steam key yesterday, so I've had the game for a tiny bit. And I'm going to be starting to record the Let's Play after this video probably. And yeah, then we'll be able to show off everything in huge detail. But this first video is just going to be showing you what is titled as new in the patch notes. That's going to be the main focus of it. For my actual Let's Play, I'm thinking of playing as this race as well, and because it's the Heinlein patch, Heinlein is notably known for writing the Starship Troopers book. That's the thing I know him most for, although the film which I've actually watched didn't have much to do with him supposedly. So in the Let's Play, I'm actually going to be having the United Citizens Federation and the Clandathu Arachnoids as opponents, which you'll know all about if you've actually watched Starship Troopers. But this video anyway, I'm going to be discussing the new features as I mentioned, so let's start to show some of those off. I better check my notes as well. So it's going to be quite hard for me to show off everything that's added in the DLC in this video, so I'm going to be doing that throughout the course of the Let's Play, but there are some things I can show you, such as the graphics for new races. So if I come to the appearance thing here, you can see there's a new option here. This is for humanoids. This isn't actually part of the DLC, I believe. This is free if you just update your game to 1.3. But what is part of the DLC is a number of very cute races. So we can see a couple within the molluscoids. There are 5 in total supposedly. So we've got a starfish type alien and a snail type alien. There's one in the arthropoids which we've already just seen. It's a moth type creature. And I believe there are 2 more. There's a fungoid creature there. And the last one, if I can remember where it is, it's in a reptiles. It's this gecko type creature. There was a DLC released for the game as well relatively recently, a plantoid pack, which they've updated the names for as well a bit in this recent patch as well. In the name list, I think there are 3 or 4 options in here. At the moment, that's about as much as I can show you that's been added in the Leviathan DLC. There are also guardians, enclave stations, enclave traders, artisans, curators, and it's a war in heaven, which is between the fallen empires. That's all part of the DLC, but I'll be showing you hopefully all of that during the course of the Let's Play, which will follow this video. As to things which were added in the patch, I can show off a bit more from this editing screen. So there are 2 new planet types. If we go to... and actually find the right ones. Here it is. They've changed how the planet types actually work now. They've been changed into 3 different categories instead of a circle of 7 different planets. So they've added savanna worlds, and they've also added alpine worlds. You can see each of these groups now have new logos. There's the frozen climate ones, there's the wet climate, which is green, and yellow for the dry climate planets. That's a decent change which will certainly affect things. There's, as I mentioned, there's also the humanoids which were added, and what else is there I can show off here. There's ethical changes, that's also noted as new within the patch notes. So there's a number of additions to some of the ethics which I believe Paradox thought were maybe a bit weaker than the others. I think 4 of them were changed. Individualist is one of them. So you can see there now they have migration attraction, and also policy happiness impact. So if you have a policy that your people don't like, it's not so impactful with the individualists. The materialists now also have a building cost modifier. That's definitely very useful, so they're a bit cheaper on your minerals. What other ones have been changed? There's Fanatic Collectivist. They actually have faction suppression, which I'll be showing off a bit more later on. So yeah, they won't have as much trouble from rebellions. And there's one more in here as well, which I've... here it is. The xenophobes actually now have planet border exclusion, which I assume means that their borders of their empire will be larger than other empires. I think the only government that was changed, and it isn't actually said to be a new feature, but it was Despotic Empire as well. So that seems to have gotten rid of the slavery bonuses, and instead it has more of that planet border extrusion, and the colony influence cost is also a bit cheaper. So before I jump into a game and show off a ton of things, I should mention game details because some things have been added here. Now the top 4 I believe are all the same as they used to be, but there's a new option here. This is Max Fallen Empires. So you now can decide how many happen to be within your game. Habitable worlds is also different as well. You can now change the likelihood of being able to colonize, basically, how many worlds are colonizable. I think I've heard in a Paradox video as well that they've supposedly reduced this amount from what it used to be in the 1.2 patch by about 2/3. So supposedly between, well, in theory about between around 200-300% will be about what it was before, I guess. So AI aggressiveness, that used to be in as well, and difficulty and allowed FDL. There's now clustered starts though, so this controls whether empires should spawn in clusters or randomly spread across the galaxy. So you can have on or off for that. Advanced neighbors. If you don't want to start next to an advanced AI start, you can turn that on or off if you happen to have any within your game. And you can now turn off endgame crises if you don't happen to like that option. Right, let's get to playing then and showing off more of the things added in the Heinlein patch. Okay, so here we are with a new game, and I've actually used a number of command codes to cheat a little bit so I can more easily show off certain features. I've unlocked the tech tree in its entirety, for example, so I can show you all of that shortly. Immediately you'll be able to see certain things that are different to the last patch if you know the game well. So we've got rally points down the right hand side in the outliner here. This is a new feature, a much requested feature that's going to make things a lot easier on people, and myself included. So there's a couple of ways you can actually add these new rally points. You can come to a planet and click it on or off from here. And there's a little bit of a description mentioning how the fleets actually move to it. Or you could come to a fleet, and there's also an option here as well, and I believe it prefers fleets over planets if a fleet happens to be nearer. I've probably mentioned that in the description, but I'm not going to read all of that. There's another option here, it's take points, so you can now get other fleets to be encouraged to group up with your fleet or discouraged in grouping up with your fleet. And I believe there's also an option to actually have your science ships auto-explore. Some people will certainly like that as well. Also, there's other things up here. You may have noticed this is a bit different. There used to be an icon there and it's no longer there. What they've actually done is stick a number of the screens from these 5 options into new panels, new options entirely. So we've got the old sector screen is now here. A leader screen is on F6. There's a faction screen, of course, that's same as the old one. Something new is strategic resources. I'm going to be discussing more about that later on. They've changed, so they've got the whole new screen. Species screen gets a whole new screen option to itself as well. No F key for that though, sadly. Policies and edicts is now there. There's an expansion plan. Now this is completely and utterly new, this screen is. So you can now see all of the different planets that are available to be colonized once you've surveyed, and I actually cheated and surveyed everything, so they're all showing up here. There's a number of options. You can turn it on if they're colonizable for your species, and you can actually select the species that you have and the habitability rating for the planets that you might want to colonize, and there's tons and tons of details here. You can even click on camera symbol to go to that system to figure out where it is. And the old screens, well, they don't have the tabs, a lot of them, like they used to, because they've been moved to there basically. I think they're pretty much all the same apart from that. There's actually a new victory type now though. There's a Federation victory. You can actually win by having your Federation own 60% of all habitable planets. So yeah, that's going to be a great new victory type potentially for the more peaceful, pacifist-minded players, certainly. So I think that pretty much covers all of the visible stuff here. So let's take a look into the technologies and have a look at these strategic resources, which I briefly mentioned. All of these are now global, which they didn't used to really be before. It used to be either a building related to them, or it used to be a shipyard feature in the main for these resources. So now they all seem to give some bonus of one type or another, and you only actually need one resource to get the bonus. Any excess resources you can trade them. So there's a number of those in the physics department there, and if we take a look in the biology department we can see a couple more. Habitability one and the food one, and the engineering one. There's some in here as well, so yeah, some pretty good ones. The old terraforming strategic resources, they've actually been changed because terraforming has actually been changed as well. So it's a lot more, well, the strategic resources for terraforming now just give you a price reduction, I believe, so that's one of them there. And terraforming, you can actually now terraform to Gaia worlds, and also terraform tomb worlds as well as a tech in the tech tree somewhere. Well, I'll try and find it in a second. If we go to this system which I colonized, Betharian stone has also changed a bit, so it's now a local resource. So you basically now build the Betharian building on one of those to get the bonus, rather than being able to trade it. I think there's a number of, I know of at least one new building type, so if I can find it here. It's the Frontier Hospital, I believe. I found the clinic, but I can't find the hospital. Here it is. So I believe this is a upgrade to the Frontier Clinic. So it gives more food and more habitability. So that's a nice addition as well. So I actually found the technologies I mentioned. You can, if you get this rare Gaia creation technology, then you can terraform your planets to Gaias. And also there's climate restoration, which allows you to terraform devastated tomb worlds, and here's the terraforming tech. And you can see that those reduce the cost. Something that's new also, which is very cool, is if I go to, well, that's actually right. At the top here, you can actually now move your capital system. Costs quite a bit in influence, but this could well be worth doing because you can certainly find bigger planets than 16 tiles systems, and yeah, you may want to move it to an amazing 25 tile world perhaps. I've also noticed that the capital world isn't always 16 tiles anymore, which is surprising, and not sure why that was done, but that's probably a good thing. So also, because your ethics distance is also related to where your capital is, if I come here, then you may want to actually move your capital system to somewhere near the middle of the galaxy or the middle of your empire to benefit more from that. That would be a pretty good reason why you would want to move the capital. The policy screen has a very welcome change that I certainly approve of. It now lets you know when your population will become unhappy with a certain policy change. For example, this race here is xenophobic, so they certainly do not like Xenos being allowed within the Empire. So yeah, it lets you know various changes here and what effects they will have. In fact, I am going to stick on quite a few unhappiness measures here, because hopefully it will allow me to show off another change that is certainly interesting as well. I think that's I've almost run out of options here, sadly. Let's put that on. Right, let's run the clock a second and hopefully I get some rebellions showing up. Yep, I do. Right, so if I come into the screen here for factions, there's now a suppress option. Basically you can now spend influence to suppress populations, and this is what the collective ethic has a reduction for. So you're spending influence to reduce the faction support by 1% each month, so it may be worthwhile in rare circumstances if you haven't yet managed your empire too well, perhaps. There's a number of sector changes as well, but I can't easily show that off here, so I'm gonna show that in the main Let's Play. But the key, really key, big changes are really to ships. So let's come into the ship designer. All of the combat ships' roles have basically been changed in one way or another, and many of the combat ships, the corvettes, the destroyers, the cruisers and the battleships, they have different sections available to them, and they all have different slots that didn't exist before, and all of these do slightly different things. So for example, on the corvette here we now have a torpedo slot, so torpedoes have changed. If I select that and try to find a torpedo, so you can see down the bottom it mentions shield penetration. I believe that is the same. There's a new stat called tracking. Now what tracking does is basically certain ships have an evasion score, and if a weapon doesn't have very good tracking, then it has a very poor chance of actually hitting that ship. So these torpedoes don't actually work too well against ships like corvettes because they have high evasion scores, but against battleships torpedoes are going to be very good. So you can have corvettes with torpedo slots, and that's something you certainly might want to do. If we go to the destroyers, they have a completely different ship role to the corvettes. So these basically seem to have 3 different sections, at least in the bow section, and a couple back here. So it looks like they're very good at defending against missiles. They have point defense slots here, which you could use if your opponents happen to have a lot of missiles perhaps. And point defense didn't used to have its own weapon slot, now it does. You could go for a large weapon though instead, perhaps, or small weapons. The bigger the weapon as well, the less tracking it actually has. If we take a look at the artillery bow here and stick on a large plasma weapon in this case, you can see the mentions the tracking there. That's only 5%. But if it was a small weapon, it would actually have a lot more. It's 40%. So that's going to be a consideration. You basically really need to be paying attention to what type of ships your opponents have, even more than you used to. And yeah, you arguably had to a certain extent before, so it's a real big deal now. Other than point defense, what else can I show off? Let's go to the cruiser ships and see what different sections they have. So the cruisers also have a torpedo slot if you wanted to use them against, well, they would be good against perhaps other cruisers that don't have high evasion, or battleships more than likely. There's another torpedo slot in there. There's the Hanna slots. This is fighters and bombers. And if we take a look at these, They have some tracking on the fighters, it would seem, but the bombers don't have tracking at all. So fighters might be quite good against corvettes, bombers not. And the broadside stern, well, it's either small or medium weapons there. I haven't discussed the auxiliary slots yet. So auxiliary slots is a new feature, and we can see a number of different options here for this. So you can have extra tracking with the enigmatic decoder. The encoder gives you extra evasion. That's ship hull points. That's another ship hull points. There's the old regenerative hull tissue available there, and the shield capacitor. So yeah, these new auxiliary slots are going to be used for the specials basically, and the old slots are still for things like armor and shields and energy. These seem to be new as well, afterburners. So if you want your ships to be a bit faster, get into range a bit sooner, perhaps for things like corvettes, that could be a pretty good option. Got a very powerful armor type up there. Let's take a look at the cruiser, or not the cruiser, the battleship I should say. Last but not least, they have this X option. These are the extremely powerful large weapons, the spine weapons. So I believe that these weapons basically is that down there of the spine of the ship. I think these are placed supposedly. I don't think the other, none of the other sections can have one of these massive weapons. It's just the spinal bow that can have these. So if we take a look at the Tachyon Lance, everyone's favourite weapon, it does, well, a huge amount of damage per second, ignores a huge amount of armor but not too good at shields, which beam weapons don't seem to be very good against anymore for the most part. There's actually a couple of new spinal weapons though that of course didn't exist before, even as non-spinal weapons. There's the Giga Cannons. These are mass drivers and they look pretty good actually. 22.81 average damage, and because these are so massive, these weapons, their tracking is absolutely useless, so you're not going to be able to hit much apart from very large ships with these in theory, if it works as intended. And we've got slots down here as well. I think the computers have probably had a bit of a change. Yeah, there's tracking added onto that. So yeah, they're a little bit different. The battleships used to have auras as well. I can't see an option for them here to add them, but I'm sure I've seen them in a tech tree, so I'm not sure if auras still exist or if they don't, to be honest, but perhaps we'll find out later on in the Let's Play. Okay, that pretty much wraps up this video then, so I'd just like to thank you for watching, and I'd also like to remind you again there's going to be a full Let's Play for patch 1.3 and the Leviathan DLC that I'm doing. That's going to be out more than likely on the day of the game's DLC release and the patch release on October the 20th. That's what I'm aiming for. If I can get it out on the 19th, I will, but yeah, it's likely to be the 20th. So in that Let's Play, I'm more than likely going to be playing as this race, and we'll have the Clan Dathlu Arachnids and the United Citizens Federation as two of the opponents. If you want to see anything particular in that Let's Play though, please let me know and I'll try and accommodate your requests as much as possible. If well, you're interested in the new patch and playing Stellaris in general, I also recommend the guide video that I did relatively recently as well. It was done with the last patch 1.2, but it's going to be very relevant still. The space monsters and pirates have changed a bit, which I'll be showing during the course of the Let's Play, but most other things it should be very accurate. I'll have to update a bit in annotations though at some point. So I'll leave a link to that here as well for you to check out. There's plenty more content on the channel as well which you may be interested in, so please check out my playlists and the homepage, and yeah, I'm sure you'll find something that you'll want to watch before the Let's Play comes out, or even after the Let's Play comes out. Right, so I've covered just about everything, haven't I? So I'd just like to thank you for watching again, and I'd also like to ask you to like the video as well if you want to help me out. I'd be very grateful to those of you who do that. And yeah, let me know if you have any requests, comments, anything along those lines in the comment section. If you want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. There's plenty more content like it going to be on the channel in the future. And I should also mention I have a Patreon page. Patreon is a service which helps to facilitate people supporting channels like my own. So you can make donations, whether small or large, via that if you want to see my channel continue well into the future. And I need as much help as I can get. So I'm really grateful to those of you who check out my Patreon page, and even more grateful to those of you who decide to become a patron of mine. And I'd just like to thank my existing patrons as well. They've been a massive help, so thank you, patrons. Right, that's it for this video then. So thank you for watching. Please check out the Let's Play, be out in a day or two. And yeah, I'll see you then.